there, everybody. Welcome to the first week of the book study of my new book, Vegetables Love Flowers. The book that's all about all the benefits that flowers bring to your veggie patch, and there's just no better way to bring flowers to that patch than with a little cutting garden. So I'm glad you've decided to join me here. I'm just really excited to come to you in your email box each and every week. So before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about this little spot of paradise that I garden in. I'm an urban farmer, so my little farm is right here in the middle of the city, and I have a little less than 3 acres. And everything I do is outside in a garden. I do not have any hoop houses or greenhouses. So everything that I talk about, you can apply at home in your garden. So I'm really looking forward to walking together and kind of sharing the backstory to my book, going through the book chapter by chapter, because this book is really about how my story unfolded becoming an all-natural gardener, and just kind of how that all came to be. The book is really a big picture book. It's the big picture of how a garden was meant to function and how you can do it at home and the steps that you can take to garden pesticide free, which should be the goal of everybody. So it's not the first chapter, it's actually the introduction to the book, really is about the lessons that I learned and kind of how this all happened. And the first thing that, as I was reviewing the introduction this morning to know what I wanted to share with you, was really what led me to where I am today is I bit off more than I could chew, which is, like, everybody that knows me, like, that's classic Lisa stuff. But that's not always the best idea, but it kind of worked out for me in this way because I dove into taking over this family's vegetable gardens. I didn't know what I was doing, how I was going to do it, and then, in fact, me throwing up my hands and saying, I just can't do it all, and kind of let the garden take over is what led me down this path. One of the other really important lessons, and it's helping me to review all this stuff to remind me, I really didn't listen to those people that had so much more wisdom about gardening back then. I give the example in the introduction about how I planted our bean seeds late, and that just allowed the Mexican bean beetle, which we fight here in the mid-Atlantic part of the country, full force. By ignoring their suggestion that they be planted at a certain time to help the plants kind of outsmart the bugs, I didn't heed their wisdom. And so, because I know how it is to be a gun-ho gardener, and I was just all caught up. So listening to the folks with gardening wisdom, sometimes it doesn't make sense to us. It didn't seem like it could be that important to me is the bottom line. That's why I didn't do it. I was all caught up in all the areas of gardening, and I just decided not to do that. And then the other really great lesson that I learned, and that really is a big part of the message of Vegetables Love Flowers, is that it is so simple to do this. It is, in fact, so simple, it goes right over most people's heads. Most of us think it's too simple to work, in fact, to let nature really do its job in our gardens. And they're the strong arm. They're the ones that can do it if we set it up and allow them to go after it. So sometimes simple, I think maybe isn't simple the key to a lot of things. We want it to be more complicated. We make it more complicated. But really the message of this book is the simplicity of nature and how we can enhance it instead of fussing with it. And that's what I kind of say. It's like arguing with nature when we try to intervene using pesticides and chemicals, which basically the way I look at that is those are shortcuts. And those shortcuts have a high price to pay. Our environment, wildlife, contamination to us. And you don't need to do it because nature is the stronghold. So I can still remember the day. I tell the story in the book about finding that stack of empty plastic bags and not knowing what they were, and Stevie walking up to me and saying, "Oh yeah, those are all the empty plastic bags that my grandpa collected leaves," and of course he didn't throw the bags away because they would never do waste those precious plastic bags. But I can still remember sitting there on my knees, and if it was a cartoon, there'd be a big question mark over top of my head, thinking to myself, what? He collected leaves that everybody else is trying to get rid of, right? That's how he got them. And piled them up and then added them to the garden the next year. I just sat there thinking, how does that work? And that really launched me onto this journey of, and it's so funny. One of the first things I thought of after Steve told me how he put it in the soil here in his garden, the first thing I thought of is, good grief, what has the soil had to eat since Grandpa passed away, 15 years before that or so. So there was just so many little lessons like that that I learned. And then alongside the family vegetable gardens, I started, pursuing this flower farming gig I was so convinced I wanted to do. And I started adding flowers into our vegetable patch. And not only was it completely fun, and especially what really drove me was I wanted to have flowers to share at my grandma's nursing home. And having the flowers in the garden with the vegetables started to bring all kinds of action that was so enjoyable to me. Sharing flowers was something I had never experienced before. You might think stopping at the grocery store and picking up a bouquet is the best thing you can do for somebody, and it's not a bad idea. I'm not saying it is. But when you start handing them bouquets from your garden, you've never experienced quite the depth of appreciation that people have for that, and admiration. It's like the best attaboy you'll ever get. So, and in addition to that, all of a sudden, all these things started filling my garden up. And, it's kind of the way that I think people imagine a garden is. I mean, literally, butterflies flitting around, you hear a hummingbird buzzing by, and then the bees are everywhere. So that immediately, after I threw up my hands and said, I'm not going to use chemicals anymore, that's what started to happen in my garden. Because as I share in the book, I did use pesticides in the beginning of my gardening life. I didn't know any better. That's what everybody did. That's what the books told you to do. That's what the magazines, articles, they would give advice on those types of things. But what really happened was when I did, as I was using pesticides in the very beginning, I then started to get educated. I then learned about a program called IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management. And that is really, it's a steps that you take to use the least amount of pesticides that you possibly could, and then using only pesticides that really target specific insects. So I went from a light pesticide user to practicing IPM, which was an improvement, but I will tell you the truth. Because I'm also following the instructions of the pesticides, suiting up to spray the volume that I had to spray, or really whenever you sprayed any pesticides, you really had to protect yourself. It was going through all those steps that finally one day I went, that's it. I've had enough. I can't do that anymore. And that's when I kind of let the garden have its way with whatever was happening out there. And then as time rolled on, it took about a year from me not using any products in my garden, pesticides, to really seeing the action start of all these wonderful birds, butterflies, and bees. But they were just the icing on the cake, because much deeper is when I experienced, as I described in the book, about that little posse of assassin bugs that carried off a caterpillar, I watched it all happen, and I thought to myself, I want more of those workers in my garden. And it just really led me down this path. And I mentioned earlier that the book is really a big picture book. There are 3 stars in this book, y'all, that I really want everybody to embrace in a different way, because I feel like they're a key component to my success of not having to rely on products. And so people that are afraid of them, put your big girl and boy pants on. Wasps, spiders, and snakes. None of which were a part of my world before I discovered all of this. They are some of the most ferocious bad bug eaters. Snakes. If you got vole troubles on your farm or in your garden, you have a couple of snakes take up residence in your garden, you'll have no more lost plants. So I really hope that as we dig deeper into this book, those are going to become your garden heroes too, because they're my favorites. There was nobody more terrified of a wasp than me. Now I am cutting flowers right alongside them. They don't even look at me. They're busy patrolling my garden, eating other insects. So I'm hoping that you will take that away too from this. So, you know, nature really provides the most powerful pest control and pollination, far more powerful than any man-made thing we could ever dream up. It's quicker. It works on its own once you set your garden up, and that's the walk that we're going to learn going through Vegetables Love Flowers. Why you should grow flowers, how to grow flowers, what flowers to grow, and then most importantly, how to tend your garden pesticide free so that your garden can come alive just like our garden is here. So I really look forward to meeting you here every week. In your inbox, we'll drop an email there, and please comment. There's a place below this video where you can post your questions. And I really appreciate you being here, and until we meet again.